All right. Sorry, I was listening to Vegan Gains live stream right now because he keeps talking about doing this debate, and he said to send him the link. I sent it to him, and he's going to be over here in a second. I want to point out, though, somebody said something about the idea of Dr. Avi or Ask Yourself showing up, because I actually have a note of three things to talk about, and one thing is the loophole that I found in the name the trait.
Hey, what's up, dude?
Hey, man, how's it going?
Yeah, so I challenged you to the debate first, right? And we're gonna debate effective activism or something.
Yeah, somebody sent you a video I made about Joey Carbstrong being a bit too extreme in his activism.
Right. Okay. So if you wanted to debate that right now, I'm down.
Okay. I did have two other things to talk about as well. And because of a response you did to a comment in your live stream about crop deaths, I almost have more interest in a mini debate on that, but I'm going to leave it completely up to you. If you want to just do the activism one, that's cool.
Well, I don't think the activism debate should last too long. I think we're like usually with topics like that, you're kind of gonna get to a point where you sort of have to agree to disagree. It's just gonna come down to personal preference, but we can do both if we have time.
Okay, so start with the activist one.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So, yeah, my position, I don't know what you consider activism to be extreme, like what your standards are, but Joey, I wouldn't call his activism extreme at all. I would just say he's doing what you would expect somebody to do if they're arguing for the idea that animals should have inalienable rights, just like human beings have. You have to use arguments around something like name the trait, where you make comparisons between human beings and animals, because like the idea of veganism is that there just aren't enough significant differences between humans and animals where you could treat animals as different beings when it comes to laws like a right to life.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm glad you mentioned name the trait, because I actually used to love name the trait until I found a way around it, and I'm not a fan of it anymore. I was actually watching you debate somebody when I was inspired to think of this element. But the problem with name the trait is it bases everything on the society we live in while we have abundance. Because if we were out in nature, just living in small tribes and didn't have a society, if somebody gave birth to some extremely disabled child, you would do away with that child, and probably rightfully so. If you had too many children you couldn't feed, you would probably quickly take out that child. Now, I'm vegan. I'm full on vegan. I think that nobody should harm animals, but I think it's not as simple as name the trait, because it comes down to we were able to protect children that were unwanted and handicapped people and all kinds of people because of our society. And now I also think that we're almost to a level where our society is so far advanced that we can protect animals and someday protect the crop death element too. I just don't think they're full on equally comparable.
Okay, I'm not understanding the argument. You're saying, what's your argument against name the trait?
The argument is that it doesn't work because it has to do with how well off your society is. Because the idea of naming the...
How is name the trait only relevant or only is a good argument depending on the society?
Well, because what would you say if I named the trait of intelligence?
Well, name the trait is only testing logical consistency. It's sort of like a variation on the marginal cases argument. So I don't understand how it wouldn't apply. Like, what's logically wrong about a name the trait argument, depending on the society you're living in?
Oh, well, I mean, I guess just based purely on logic, there wouldn't be, based on what we're able to do.
Okay, so there's no logical problem with the name trait argument. You only see, like, say, a practical one when it comes to activism?
Just a practical one when it comes to the idea of discussing how these things work. But But anyways,
So can you give me like an example of a practical issue you would run into when you're doing activism when it comes to using name the trait?
not outside of the thing I just mentioned. Just the idea that it doesn't work on its own outside of the idea of talking about logic and like what one might want to do in a perfect world. But it doesn't have anything to do with our current society because I think at least in Canada and the U.S., I think we're capable of being
like,
fully
I
vegan.
would like let's just try to get over this because I think it's an easy point to kind of maybe brush to the side and continue the discussion, or maybe we could come to an agreement. So you think name the trait wouldn't be an effective argument in a society where, say, they may have to kill children if there's like a huge lack of abundance of food or something?
Correct. So only in the philosophical side of how I like to discuss things does name the trait matter. So I just want to throw that element in. My main concern is we care about animals. We want the world to stop eating animals. And because it's legal to eat animals, we have to convince people that want to eat animals not to. So in not that being nice to carnists always works, but there's almost no other option. We have to convince them because the law is not on our side.
Right, but your point about name the trait, you're saying it's unpractical to use name the trait. I don't know, on indigenous tribes people or something.
Just as far as looking at a philosophical idea, name the trait just doesn't completely work because it only works if you look at our current society. I think it fits within our society. I shouldn't have sidetracked off to that, but I just do not think it's consistent because it's only referring to our abundance we have now.
Well, no, it's not. Again, like you admitted that there's no logical issue with name the trait. There's no logical contradiction that it creates. Like, again, all it's doing is testing for logical consistency. So I just don't understand how it wouldn't apply. You couldn't use name the trait in, like, say, a setting with indigenous tribes people where they may have to violate human rights for some, like, I don't know, greater overall good to prevent more people from dying.
Sorry. I got slightly sidetracked. Can you repeat that last part?
So name the trait, you admitted that there's no logical inconsistency that it creates, but name the trait, it only tests logical consistency. So I don't understand how it would only apply or make sense to use that sort of strategy in a situation where society is very abundant in resources, because again, you're only deploying it to test logical consistency. So whether you're in a society that has, you know, inalienable human rights, that has resource abundance, or a tribal society that's very unabundant in resources, and they may have to violate human rights for the greater good of society to prevent further deaths, you can still run name the trait. Again, there's no logical problem with name the trait itself. And it's entirely about testing logical consistency. So if you're trying to argue with indigenous tribes people about name the trait, why they shouldn't kill animals, if they're in favor of killing human beings for their own survival, and they either find a trait that they can name where that would require them to take away human rights, or further take away human rights, or if they can't name a trait, there's no logical problem. So it really just ends up with whatever they choose.
For sure. And I agree with you there. And that's why I pointed out, like, I mostly like the idea. Whenever I see it used, I feel like it's often used as the reason for veganism, and I think there's a lot of loopholes in there. But yes, for the logic alone, and if you're right, that's all it's for, then that is correct. But also, it's not just about rights violations, because there wouldn't be a rights violation by neglecting to protect somebody. I mean, in my mind anyways, if there's somebody that is unable to take care of themselves, like a extremely handicapped person, I'm glad we live in a society that values life and will protect them. But it's not a rights violation to let somebody essentially be neglected to death. But
Sure,
again, it's
sure. I would
yeah.
say in most situations that'd be correct. Yeah,
Um,
I'd agree with you there.
But yeah, so sorry I sidetracked onto that. But I am curious. Do you really think? Sorry to word it like that. Do you think that there's a possible vegan future by being extreme to carnist, the people that we want to convince? I feel like we just need to have good conversations, find good middle ground, and eventually work our way through them.
Okay, I don't know what you mean by being extreme. Like, do you mean terrorism, like blowing up slaughterhouses, or do you mean just like making an argument?
I would say making rude, pushy arguments. Like, so you can show people this is what happens in the slaughterhouse. You tell all the facts. We shouldn't hold back. But when people talk about how like they're not going to go vegan, but you have an opportunity to discuss ideas of like reduction and various things to get the thoughts flowing in their head to slowly work towards a vegan future. I feel like there's almost no other route to go. And in that video that I did on Joey Carbstrong, the second she said she wasn't going to be a vegan, I could see in his eyes, he was like, oh, I can't create a vegan here. So now I'm going to berate her about everything and just like attack her. I don't know. I just don't think it's a good approach.
So I have a few things to say about like rudeness. You mentioned that specifically. So what's rude to one person can be different for another person. Like I've debated, Muslims and Christians on religion before. Like if you make a very strong argument where they can't really think of any way to, rebut that, like I've brought up, the problem of evil. You'll see a lot of Christians and Muslims will get really mad at you for bringing up the problem of evil because it's just an extremely strong argument. And people just get frustrated when they have to, answer very difficult questions or their beliefs are challenged. It's not necessarily rude to do that. It's just the way they react to something like that, and that's not something you can really control. So if you're debating veganism, you make a very strong argument, like, I don't know, would you kill and eat your dog? Okay, no. So what's different about a cow? I've seen people get pissed off at that. Like, I've literally seen people get into fights with activists just because they're handing out flyers about Canada Goose. So you can't really control who is and isn't going to get mad at you as long as you use what I guess would be considered generally acceptable, behaviors in social settings. I don't think you're really doing anything wrong if you make somebody frustrated. And I think it's good to make some people frustrated because if they're frustrated, they're maybe more likely to think about it more. I've actually come into contact with a lot of people just out in daily life who've seen me through my YouTube channel, and they said at first they fucking hated me because I pissed them off so much. But they kept thinking about me and hate watching me, and then they eventually just had to accept that, oh, like, he's right. Like, I've gotten that quite a lot, so I also don't think it's necessarily a bad debate strategy to be okay with frustrating people.
Yeah, and that's awesome that worked out for the people that were watching you. I would just imagine from what we can recognize from people, I mean, if you just look at how people react to the idea of vegans in general, there's such a negative idea to the word. And now part of that is because people hate the idea of feeling judged, and so they're going to just have this negative vibe to it. But I think a big part of it is when you get kind of wackadoodles like that vegan teacher, saying these extreme things like that Alex O'Connor should be hung and, all these different things, it makes people just think instantly vegan bad. And I think in my mind right now, the best thing we can do is try to get everybody, because most people are against animal abuse. Every time I ask somebody that eats meat if they'd be okay with punching a cow in the face for no reason, they say no. So somewhere in there, they think it becomes okay. And if we just get the whole world, all the non-vegans, talking and having, in the same way that people talk about abortion and circumcision and all these different things, instead of either go vegan or nothing, if we get everybody talking about, hey, let's force our government to change regulations. Let's get cameras in factory farms, making sure people can't do the worst of the worst. Let's start reducing. Let's start going for free range. All the silly ideas of humane slaughter work in that direction to eventually get to the goal. But I don't think we can just bounce to that goal.
It would, like, yeah, so when it comes to things like animal rights, you're going to have a pendulum. The pendulum is kind of swinging in that direction of animal abolition. But if you're a vegan activist, you, by definition, would have to argue for the rights of these animals. And when you're just making these welfarist arguments, that's not vegan activism. That's just animal welfarism. Mm-hmm. So you are going to have to make arguments like name the trait, where you link, human rights and animal rights together. So even though I understand that, yeah, there is a pendulum and it's swinging in the one direction, and you're going to see incremental changes over time. If we're talking about vegan activism specifically, you do have to make those arguments linking animal rights and human rights. It's kind of like if we were to, be back maybe 200 years ago when black people were still in slavery. You're not going to make the argument that, okay, well, maybe we could just improve, the welfare of these black people, make it illegal to import slaves because, they're dying on these ships and it's really horrible. And maybe we should just, make it so they can't be whipped too hard. They can only, be punished by other means. Like, if you're a human rights activist, you wouldn't make those arguments. You'd make the argument that these are human beings too. I don't see any difference between black people and white people other than skin color. So why aren't we granting them the same rights that we have?
No, I think that's completely wrong. I think that's exactly what we do and what we did do with slavery. So in the early 1800s, so about a little over 50 years before the Civil War, it became illegal to transport slaves. So the slaves that were here, and then any others would just have to be bred into slavery, which is obviously horrible. But then when it came time to emancipate, there was a bunch of different things. Like, a lot of people, especially in the North, wanted to emancipate, but also wanted them to be able to have the right to vote, and a handful of things. And Lincoln told one of his senator buddies, if we ask for everything, we will not get the right amount of votes. We need to end slavery. And then 10, 15 years later, black men got the right to vote. And every movement, whether it's feminism or it's slavery, everything happens in baby steps, usually with everybody fighting to get each next step, like ending bullfighting or ending fur. Fur will probably get ended before consuming animals.
Well, you're kind of conflating legislation and activism. The very first human rights activism against slavery was an abolitionist movement. It's always been an abolitionist movement. It's just that activists have been trying to pass legislation that just makes it harder to for these slave owners to keep owning slaves. But again, the idea behind the movement is abolitionism, and all the arguments in favor of getting rid of slavery are abolitionist. They're not welfarist. It's just that when it comes to legislation, it's easier to pass legislation that's baby steps, like, preventing transatlantic slave trade. But if you actually look at the rhetoric of the activism of the day, it's entirely abolitionist. Nobody was, making the argument that, well, let's just treat slaves better. Maybe you could just own maybe 3 or 4 slaves rather than 10. Nobody was making those sorts of arguments, and
I think that's the problem, though.
But I don't see that as a problem. There has to be an abolitionist argument if you're in favor of their rights. Like, it has to be abolitionist.
Fair enough. So my general stance is an abolitionist argument. Like, I mean, I go to an extreme. I don't think we should even have pets. I'm pretty set on animals should be nowhere near humans. But I also, when I talk to people, I talk about reduction. I talk about various different things. And I think you're right. I think with slavery, the activists, the extremists, the loudest, like that vegan teacher types, but for slavery, were abolitionists only. But the majority of people talking and making it to where the senators wanted to bring the proposition up, the majority were accepting of each of the baby steps. And so I think I don't think the activists should stop having their overall message and telling people, like, go fully vegan. That's the thing to do. But the people that won't accept the absolute message, if we had all of us people, especially somebody huge like you, pushing this message of meatless Mondays and some stuff that sounds shitty like that, I really think it would do large things for the animals, for the movement.
Yeah, I'm not going to promote Meatless Mondays for the same reason I wouldn't promote Slaveless Tuesdays.
Slaveless Tuesdays would be amazing for slaves, though, right?
No, that doesn't argue for their rights.
True. Oh, well, it argues for the rights on Tuesday, but they'd feel great about it.
That just argues for a privilege they may be granted, but that doesn't really argue for their rights. Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable, telling Hitler, maybe rather than killing all the Jews, you could just kill like maybe 70% so that they just become an ethnic minority.
No, that would be incredible for the Jews.
If you were, say, in Nazi Germany and you had the power to advocate for Jewish rights, you would be arguing on a platform that let's just, maybe kill off 70% rather than all of them.
If I had a higher likelihood of achieving that than all of them, yes. But I'd probably do something like I do now, which is I express that I'm vegan. I express it to the extreme. But the majority of talking to people is seeing where they're at and working with their ideas. I'll talk to non-vegans and say, well, what do you think about this? The whole punch a cow thing. And then slowly start talking about things and they'll go, yeah, I think I might do this. I might try this out. That's the approach I do. And anything, people always bring up slavery, Jews, they'll bring up beating women, beating children. Every little bit that helps is good. Beatless Mondays for beating your wife would be amazing for the wife. It just must be, right? Like for the person being harmed, for the animals being harmed, if reductionist ideas make us breed less cows into existence, that has to be better, even if it's not the ultimate goal.
Like again, that's welfarism. That's not something that will actually grant them rights. And when you're talking about trying to pass legislation where you are kind of moving that pendulum towards that direction, again, you're rarely ever going to see huge legislative changes all at once where, one day a whole group doesn't have rights, but now they do have all the same rights. Same with black rights. They first were emancipated, didn't have the right to vote. They were granted the right to vote. Then they were granted, these other rights and freedoms gradually. Mm-hmm. But again, if you're looking at activism of the day when it comes to black rights, when it comes to women's rights, the actual activism itself has always been centered around things like abolitionism. It's only these legislative changes that they knew they could, realistically get that they were okay with.
Yeah.
But you're never going to see women advocate, can you just beat us less? Could you just let us maybe not quite vote, but just, be able to, I don't know, have some sort of political... There's never any, this is never a part of activism because... it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
nobody ever has these. And again, by the way, when you're talking about emancipation of slaves, wars were fought over this. People had to die. Same with actually women being able to have the right to vote. I'm pretty sure people did die. They were planting explosives. And I think in France, they actually ended up getting halberds and pole arms and marching through the streets and threatening to fucking kill people so that they could get the right to vote. So, I mean... When you're talking about vegan extremism, I don't think it's ever going to get to the point where you have vegans blowing up businesses and getting pole arms, or going to like having flat out civil wars over things like this. So, like when we're trying to link these, or draw comparisons between black rights and women's rights activism to veganism, I don't know how you could say Joey Carbstrong is committing extreme activism.
Oh, I wouldn't call him committing extreme activism, but real quick, I do want to mention, I don't like to pretend I know things that I don't, and I don't like to claim something is something that I don't know. So you might be right about, like, for women's rights, that they were never going for individual issues, but I don't know if that's true. Because
Well, I'm not saying they didn't go for individual issues. Yeah, women's rights, like every activist organization or movement does attack single issues. So,
Gotcha.
Well,
Well,
like
because
the right
women
to
didn't.
vote, emancipation.
Yeah. Well, women
yeah.
didn't have the right to own property. They didn't have the right for divorce. If there was a divorce,
Yeah.
they didn't have the right to own their children, and they didn't have the right to vote. And each of those happened in like 10-year increments, like something like that. And sure, the overall thing was, we're women, we're human, let us be. But each time something came close to like being voted into law, there would probably be some big push like, don't piss off the men too much by saying we want this and that. Let's just let us get the right to own property. Instead of when the husband dies, it goes to the oldest son. Now the woman can own her own house. And that's kind of what I think we need to do.
Sure,
with
but
what we're doing.
Like, you've called Joey Carbstrong an extremist, right? Or he's doing like extreme forms of vegan activism. Like, again, if we're gonna draw parallels between human rights activism when it comes to women's rights, black rights, and you're fine with women's rights and black rights movements, saying things like black people should have a right to vote, they should be emancipated, and women saying same thing, like. I don't know why it's extreme for a vegan activist to, use an argument like name the trait and say animals should have a right to live.
Sorry, no, I wasn't saying that the name the trait was extreme. That was just a separate note. But okay, no, you're right though. Him being extreme, it's what I call extreme, is nowhere near what the other extreme things we were talking about. It just, in my mind, the idea is, if something pushes away the person we're trying to convince, I call that extreme. And that made me want to ask you a question, though. If we could press a button and magically know that going the approach I'm saying would get us to a legally vegan world in North America in 20 years, and that going the approach that you're saying we should go, if we knew it would take, say, 50 years, with that magical knowledge, do you still think there's a wrong thing to it? Or is it just that you don't think it's likely that my approach would be best?
Well, I would just say it's likely that your approach wouldn't be best, but if I had a crystal ball and my ultimate goal was, abolitionism, I'd probably go with your approach.
Okay.
If I somehow knew, because you'd end up saving like literally trillions of animals with that approach. Just the difference in lives saved would be massive.
For sure.
But
yeah.
You mentioned, by definition, extreme activism is anything that pushes away the people that you're trying to reach. Mm-hmm. So, like, that could literally be anything.
Oh, true. But what I would say is, like, something that we could recognize reasonably. I mean, obviously it's subjective, but if somebody just hears that somebody's vegan and thinks that we shouldn't harm animals, and they think that's stupid, then that doesn't mean anything. That the idea that they're going to think that no matter what doesn't make anything a person said extreme. But if somebody says something specifically that would bother somebody when they could have said something else, I don't know the exact. I guess just the idea of telling people, you should be a vegan, and if you're not, then you're killing these animals and it's horrible. And then the person says, well, maybe I'll cut back. I'll do like half the amount. And instead of like viewing that as progress, telling the person, no, if you do that, you're still horrible. And then the person goes, oh, well, I don't even want to be associated with vegans. I have to call that extreme if it's going to push away progress for animals.
Okay, I have a few things to say there. So, like, say if we were like killing and eating black people,
Okay.
and somebody were to say, you were to have this argument that like Joey Carbstrong does with the "change my mind," everything, and you were to say, well, black people have feelings too. They're people like us, and then they say, okay, well, you know what? Maybe I'll just like have the amount of black people I kill and eat during the week. Like I've been killing and eating, 2, 3 black people a week. Maybe I'll just kill one black person a week. Would you be like, that's super?
Yes, I wouldn't do it in the silly way that you just did it, but I would say it like, oh, that's awesome, and I think you're on a good track, like because we're talking about something being legal, something that these people can do. So the only thing that stands between them and doing it is them being convinced not to. Now, I think it's bullshit. I think there's a lot of bullshit in the world, like circumcision and the death penalty and all these things. But when we're working in a society where the laws are the only thing preventing people from doing things, if you could legally eat black people and I convince somebody to eat half the amount of black people, there's going to be a handful of black people very happy that I'm happy that they're not being killed, right?
Yeah, my next question about that would be, so why would you think that kind of bending to the knee to that idea that, well, it's a good compromise that you're killing less black people, why do you think that would create a greater sort of like moral push for somebody to change versus really trying to get them to recognize that they're committing a horrible atrocity? Like, I think it's like, I think especially when we're talking about animals, even among animal rights activists, we tend to trivialize animal lives, even though we consider, animals, just as we say we consider animals, just as important as human beings. But it sounds like you're trivializing the lives of animals when you say shit like this. I don't like the idea of, saying, well, that's a good step that you're, reducing animal deaths. I don't think anybody would accept that if we were talking about like a human atrocity, like a Holocaust.
Yes.
We wouldn't be like, if somebody were really committing a Holocaust and they said, okay, well, I'll kill half as many people as I was planning, we wouldn't give them a pat on the back. We'd still say, you're a sick fuck, and you should be, brought to justice.
Yeah.
And I mean, well, like, going back to one statement you said vegan teacher was being extreme when she said Alex O'Connor should be hung. Can you give me an argument for why he deserves to live?
Why he deserves to live? Probably for the animals' sake, because if he was killed for eating animals in the world we live in, where it's legal, it would make people less likely to switch over. Now in the future she will look right. Her statement will look right in the future, but her statement harms animals today.
So wait. So the only argument you can give to justify Alex O'Connor's life is that other people would find that as an act of extremism. But outside of that, if this were, say, a situation where he would be killed and he wasn't a public figure, and nobody knew that this was a politically motivated killing, you'd be in favor of his death?
At this point, I would. If the information we have about being healthy on a vegan diet could be like 100%, we're all convinced of it, and there's been enough time that it's official. We need no animals. Then I would say that yes, with that knowledge, and especially if it was in law, I would be in favor of that for sure. At this point, I would say, even though I think we can be vegan and healthy, I've been vegan 8 years. My daughter's 7, and she was born vegan and has always been. I think we can be, but it's new enough that I don't like to make that extreme claim that, like, if I was out in nature and I saw a man killing another man, I would kill the killer. But a man in nature without a society killing an animal and eating it, I would be on the fence, especially depending on what knowledge I felt comfortable with. So anyways, I don't want to say I think Alex should die, but I can imagine a realistic world where it does become a very harsh punishment for harming animals for no reason, like enjoying their flesh.
Okay, well, it sounds to me like you're kind of making an excuse for him that maybe he's ignorant and he could change in the future. But I mean, like, while that's happening, he's probably, over the course of years or decades that he may be alive, where he isn't going to be vegan, he's likely going to be responsible for the death of several hundreds, if not thousands, of animals. So if this were like a similar circumstance where a human being thought in some way he was justified in killing other humans, and he, for some reason, thought it was necessary, either for political reasons or for health reasons or what have you, you would feel comfortable with letting that person kill hundreds or thousands of people over the course of how many years until the society they lived in came to this new realization that there isn't any political or health or otherwise reason to kill other human beings.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to be convinced of something, and I feel pretty darn close to convinced of it. But yeah, it would involve needing a society pushing a certain law. If I gained if the healthiest a human could be was a certain number, and I could gain 50% extra health by eating a human, I don't know, out in the world without a society stopping me, maybe I would. If I was on an island and I needed to survive, I would definitely eat a human. So I think it becomes complicated depending on if we're looking at a society and how their laws protect others.
Yeah, so when you're talking about Alex, who's been part of the vegan community, who's an Oxford University graduate, so has to have a pretty good head on his shoulders, and he has made a video admitting that on a well-planned vegan diet you can be perfectly healthy, and his only excuse was, I can't be fucked to have a well-planned diet because I just like eating out with my friends. You think that's an adequate justification to allow him to live?
To allow him to live. I mean, I guess I have to know what you mean, because I don't want to stop him from living. If I could press a button and I don't get in trouble and I can make him not live, I wouldn't make him and like all carnists die. Again,
well,
I think
him specifically, let's say.
Okay, yeah, him specifically. I think personally, even though I'm not in his shoes, I would sacrifice my speaking tours and whatever else his IBS and whatever got in the way of. So if I was him, I would have stayed vegan and just stopped doing speaking tours.
Well, no, I'm asking him specifically if he could press a magic button where he would no longer exist.
No.
Let's say it's like a death note. You wouldn't press that button, even though nobody could figure out that it was a politically motivated killing.
Well, no. But one reason is I think he's one of the most important voices in the vegan movement even today.
He's not vegan.
I know. Well, he's one of the most important voices in the vegan movement today.
By the way, he never even promoted veganism. If you've seen some of his talks, he's openly spoken, even while claiming to be vegan. He's not in favor of giving animals codified rights into law. So, like, this guy has said tons of things against the idea of veganism. I don't think even his beliefs around vegan activism could be considered vegan.
Well, so what I factor in when I talk about the idea of the vegan movement would be anything going towards less animals dying.
By the way, you'd be okay with somebody killing and eating animals so long as they're a good vegan activist. So say if they were turning, like, I don't know, a person vegan every day, you'd be okay with them killing an animal every day.
I don't know what you mean by okay with.
Well,
but yeah.
Well, if the alternative is you could kill them, but they wouldn't turn an extra person vegan each day.
If more animals were saved by a vegan activist eating meat and then turning a lot of people vegan, I think I probably would.
That's your argument in favor of like letting somebody like Cosmic Skeptic live?
Well, just separately from the idea of letting Cosmic Skeptic live, I would want as little suffering as possible. If there's X amount of suffering, whatever I could do to make that X amount of suffering decrease, I would go for that. As far as Cosmic Skeptic goes, I think he's probably doing better than most meat eaters in the world as far as causing less suffering. And I don't know how comfortable I feel just having people die due to how the human brain works, and people are raised eating meat, and it takes them a while to be convinced that they should change. At one point I ate meat, so I would hate for somebody to have killed me when I did. So it's hard for me to say somebody should die, especially Alex.
So, like, if you could look at this from the third person, you would wish if you could go back in time and choose to either still be alive now, or somebody could kill you and prevent who knows how many animals from dying, like, say, thousands. I don't know how old you are, but conceivably.
38.
Yeah, so conceivably, I think PETA did an analysis on this, and I think there's been a few others. Somewhere between 60 and 100 animals die per year for your average person on, an average diet. So conceivably, by now, you could have saved thousands of animals if you had somebody kill you earlier on, right? So if you could look at, like, I don't know, your life in the third person, or look at an alternate dimension, you would prefer thousands of animal lives die just so that you could exist today as a vegan.
Correct. Well, first of all, I want to mention I said 38, but I'm 37. I don't know why I said that. I would not sacrifice myself for 1,000 animals or 1,000 humans. No.
Okay, you would. So just for you to be alive, you would want thousands of animals or humans to die.
Want's a strong word, but I would choose that over.
You would
over
choose
myself.
that. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Let's try to be honest.
So let's
Would you
change
not?
the No. Let's change the hypothetical. So let's say if the Holocaust never happened, but if the Holocaust never happened, you would not exist today. You'd be in favor of the Holocaust?
I don't want this to come across as specifically a specific Holocaust with specific race of people, but 6 million people, I would not trade my life for 6 million people. No.
Okay, so there is a threshold.
I doubt there is. The threshold would be my loved ones. I would probably sacrifice myself for my kids, my wife, my mom, and my siblings. And aside from that, there's almost no threshold.
You would be in favor of the Holocaust happening if it ensured your existence.
Again, nothing about Jewish people, but yes, 6 million people. Yes, I would not sacrifice myself for 6 million. And if I was about to die,
no. I'm saying, like, let's say you were in this spirit realm.
Oh, never existed. Correct. I want to exist. Now that I know what my existence is and what I want in life, I would say right now that I choose existing more than I choose saving 6 million people.
So like, just so the hypothetical is clear, let's say you were in, I don't know, you got hit by a car, and God told you you're dead now, and you have two options. Either I can wipe you out of existence, so you're not going to go to heaven, hell, purgatory, anything. You just won't exist. Mm-hmm. Or I can ensure the Holocaust will happen, but you will get your old life back. Or I could make the Holocaust not happen, and then you'll be wiped out of existence. Like, what would you choose? You'd choose to go back to life, have the Holocaust occur.
It becomes a little more complicated when the element is added that, like, I'm dying of dying versus the sacrifice. I definitely would not sacrifice myself for a certain number of people.
Sure.
But coming back after a death, I honestly don't think I'd be able to choose. Damn, it's trickier. I can safely say I wouldn't sacrifice myself for others. I would risk my life. I would fight in the streets for people's rights, knowing there's a potential I'll live from it, but I would not press a button and end my life to save 1 billion people. As far as if I'm already dead and nobody like I could trade for me did me wrong, I don't know if I would swap out in that case. I'd probably just let myself get snapped out of existence.
Okay.
But not a personal sacrifice, no.
Okay.
And not by choice. I don't think I could get myself to do it. I don't think you would either. But we might think we would, and it's noble of us. I just don't think we would.
Okay.
Sorry if that was offensive.
Okay. So, right. All right. The factor that would determine whether or not you'd be okay with allowing somebody. Well, the factor that you'd be okay with, say, sacrificing yourself as if you'd already be dead, but if you could actually go back in time and ensure you wouldn't exist to save thousands of others, you wouldn't be okay with it.
No, I wouldn't. No, I'd consider that a sacrifice because I would have
Right.
to rewind time. Yeah.
Right. Okay. But you would think the same thing of somebody else. Like, say, if you knew that you could save thousands of animals by killing somebody, you wouldn't be in favor of doing that, even if you could get away with it, and nobody would know it's a political killing.
No, I wouldn't trade one for another. I think it's complicated in the world we have with trading it one animal for another. But no, I wouldn't trade a person for other people. No.
Okay, so if you could kill Hitler, you would not do that because you could conceivably convince him to stop the Holocaust.
If I could kill Hitler, I mean, doing a whole timey-wimey thing where it's not going to affect anything and like butterfly effect. If I could magically know somebody was going to do horrible things and I could kill them before they did it, of course I would. Yeah.
So then you'd be in favor of killing Karnas, if assuming nobody would find out that it's a politically motivated killing.
Yeah, I don't feel to that level with the animal situation. I don't like I was saying, if there was no society as in nature, I saw two people, one killed the other, I would kill the killer. I would need to figure out the details if I saw somebody killing an animal. If you were in nature and somebody killed an animal to eat it, you would kill them if you could get away with it?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
So let me just try to make this clear, because I don't know if this is a contradiction or if you are finding the animal Holocaust to be less significant as the human Holocaust, like the Jewish Holocaust, because I thought I heard you say, yeah, I would kill Hitler because he's doing some horrible atrocity, and I know that killing Hitler would stop, the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. But in the same vein, you wouldn't kill a meat eater who is contributing to the Holocaust. So are you saying that the animal Holocaust isn't as important to you as the human Holocaust?
Correct.
Okay.
Based on the idea that I assume animals have less of a desire to live or will to live outside of instinct. I think it's complicated. I think we should not kill or harm animals and leave them to nature. But I would say, with my knowledge of what humans are, I don't have to, but I do have a higher level of respect for the life of humans, all else considered. Yeah.
Okay, so the trait difference that you see in humans and animals that would make an animal Holocaust less bad than a human Holocaust would be their will to live. They don't have as much of an interest in living, according to you? Or
I don't know. I don't know if they do, but yes. And just for fun, because you brought that up, I would say, if I could make an equal amount of suffering from animals disappear as an equal amount of suffering from humans, I'd probably treat it somewhat equal if I didn't know either, because if I magically knew it was equal amounts of suffering, that wouldn't change things. But a life being magically taken out of existence, as of now, with my knowledge, I would have to assume that a cow doesn't think, tomorrow I'm going to hang out with my cow buddy. And that doesn't mean that it should not have rights to not have its life taken, but compared to a human that might feel how I feel with how badly I want to continue living, that's the detail I'm going off of now. Yeah.
Okay, so if everybody in the Holocaust could be replaced with people who had, say, a similar level of interest in living in the future compared to your average animal like a cow or chicken, you would say that would be morally equivalent.
Would I say it would be morally if it's morally equivalent, then I would say it would be morally equivalent. Yes.
Well, no. I'm saying if human beings had a similar interest in living in the future compared to your average animal.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The animal holocaust would be morally equivalent to the human holocaust.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. I think I understand. I think I've proven my point that you are trivializing animal deaths, and that's why you see Joey's activism as extreme, because I just don't see how you could have the same opinion if this were a human rights issue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think this necessarily connects to the Joey thing because I, like Joey and like you, think that animals should not be killed. But I do want to ask you a question because of something you just said. If there was a burning building and there are two 20-year-olds in there and one was just, let's say, had a mind very similar to yours, and the other one was a severely mentally challenged person that we can say they basically have no will to live and no thought of the future, would you not choose immediately?
Yeah, I if I had to choose who lives, who dies, I'd choose the person who could benefit the most from living. But like again, that's not really the point I'm making. The point I'm making is if you were to come across somebody in the street who was contributing to a human holocaust and all they told you was, I'm killing probably 100 or so human beings per year. Yeah. Maybe I'll just cut it down a little bit and kill maybe 50, 60.
Yeah.
I think the way you would react is you are a disgusting fucking person
who
is murdering. I have a really hard time fucking believing
I would
that.
take them out to dinner, and you should as well, because we're talking about a world where it's legally acceptable. You want them to stop.
Well, look, if I don't even know why it matters if it's legally acceptable. The Holocaust was legally acceptable. I don't think if you were to have a dinner with Himmler, who was saying we should wipe out all the Jews, and you could somehow talk him down to, well, let's just wipe out 70%, you would in any way pat him on the back. I think you would try to fight for the rights of those remaining 30% and say there's absolutely no fucking way you should kill any of them.
I would do both. Oh man, I just lost what I was going to say.
I don't see how you can do both, because you're trivializing the lives of those remaining 30% and saying, well, that's good because those 70% don't really need to live. But, it's great that you're letting those 30%, you're trivializing those lives.
It's not
so I don't see how you could concurrently argue for both that, if you're going to reduce, that's great, but you should really, stop. We're talking about fucking lives.
Yeah. So there's a handful of different things that go into this. Part of it's just how humans work in general. But let's take something like circumcision. That's one of the biggest topics to me. I think that needs to end immediately. And I know people that are in my family, close people to me, that have their kids circumcised. And a thing that I think should be illegal. Horrible thing to do. I'd compare it to tribal tattoos on the face or something.
If it's for ritualistic reasons or for cultural reasons, then certainly.
Yeah, exactly. But I still see those people daily, and I don't look at them and go, I'm disgusted by you. I have to live my life, be normal with them, and try to convince as many people as possible to stop cutting off baby dicks. And
so
I do the same with people.
You're talking about something different. You're
very
talking
different.
about you're talking about a situation where you're completely burning the bridge with people versus the actual activism that you do. You can have a hard stance that you should never, ever circumcise a child unless it's there's a medical reason behind it, and not burn the bridge with that person. That's totally different than having this position where, you shouldn't circumcise children, but, if you're going to have another kid, maybe you should just consider circumcising him. If you don't, that's great, but, you don't have to listen to me. That's a totally different thing. You're talking about burning a bridge versus, doing this welfare activism and abolitionist activism at the same time. I don't think you can at the same time. There's no way you can have a conversation with somebody where you say, oh, pat them on the back. That's great that you're only, killing half the amount of people or animals that you were before. But then at the same time say, but you should really, stop killing entirely. If you're going to trivialize the lives of those people or animals, where you say, oh, well, that's great that you're reducing, you can't trivialize their lives and argue for not trivializing their, I just see that as a contradiction. Either all of those lives matter or they don't.
No, they matter, and that's how much they matter to me. They matter that I have to think of what do I think is the most likely thing to cause the least amount of suffering and to get us to this world that I think is the best world, and I take that approach with it. So let me bring something to you that might make this come a little more clear, because I in a message you had sent me, I don't think I understood your position on animal rights violations anyways. So if you take something like the element of crop deaths that is rodenticides, poisons are put out, rats come and get it. They have a slow, agonizing death, bleeding out. Now, I don't think this is a reason to not be vegan, but if you had a plate full of sliced up apples and there was a certain amount of suffering that came from the rodents dying in rodenticides, and then you had a plate with a steak on it, and let's say in this magical hypothetical, the steak and the apple are identical nutrients. There's no difference, but one took killing an actual cow to get that steak, and one was the apples and the rodents, and we knew that the suffering was, let's call it doubled, or let's say tripled. The amount of suffering that came from these rodents to get this apple was 3 times the amount of suffering and life ending that it took to get this steak. Which one's the more moral thing to do, and also which one's the more vegan thing to do if you had to eat one?
Yeah, the apple.
No bullshit. No way.
Yeah, no, it would be the apple, because in the steak situation, you are taking away the rights of another being, whereas the apple situation, you're not violating their rights. Their deaths are a result of them violating the rights of, say, the farmer for trying to take their food.
Well, okay, describe rights violation.
By the way, okay, so a rights violation would say, I guess we could classify it as taking away the freedoms or liberties or ownership from somebody else. So if I were to steal your clothes, if I were to hit you in some way, if I were to kill you, those are all rights violations. So in the one case, say like the farmer's property being their crops, if they have to, say, lay out poison to protect their crops, it's the rodents that are violating their rights, and it's the farmers that are protecting their property rights from those rodents. And by the way, if we're going to use this like rodenticide poison thing specifically, I don't know if that's commonly used anywhere other than Australia. And those mouse plagues actually affect livestock as well. They leave out poisons in the meat industry for those rodents.
So yeah, and I don't need to use it as a specific, this is what we need to stop doing, but mostly just to see where we are as far as how we feel. I can't, with the reason I'm vegan, the reason I think that we should not make animals suffer, should not end their lives, I cannot see how, even if there's a distinction with rights violations, that you could say, and let's ignore the idea of plagues and all this other thing, just the idea of causing suffering and dead animals, that you could say that you would rather eat the food that would cause more suffering.
Well, let me give you a hypothetical. So let's say you needed to... well, we can use the same hypothetical, essentially. Let's say you have a human steak and only one human died, so it's human meat on a plate. And on the other plate, you have a loaf of bread. And with the loaf of bread, there happened to be a horrible accident where 3 workers on this field ended up dying due to malfunction of machine equipment. What's more ethical, the eating the bread or eating the steak?
Gotcha.
We can also
Like-
change it too, so that it's not, say, just an incidental thing.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
say that we were at war with another tribe or culture of people, and these people were trying to steal all of our food. Now, the farmer who is trying to, grow this wheat so that he can sell it at the market needs to protect his field, and he had to shoot 3 people who were trying to destroy the entire field. What would be the more ethical, food option? The bread or, the human steak?
Sorry, I might have missed part of it. So there were humans trying to destroy the field, and he killed them, and you could be eating them, and then
No.
What was the
no.
other aspect?
What I'm saying is, I gave you 2 different hypotheticals. They both mean the same thing essentially. So more death occurred to produce the bread versus the human meat steak. But I think the second hypothetical maybe made more sense because it's something that would kind of normally happen or occur over time. But let's say we were at war with another culture of people. These people were trying to destroy our fields or steal from these fields so that we couldn't sell the bread to our culture of people. If the farmer, for each loaf of bread, say, had to kill 2 people to produce a loaf of bread to protect his crop from this other invading culture, would eating human meat steaks be more ethical than eating the bread?
Yeah, I think part of it would come down to the legal system.
Well, we're talking about morality. It doesn't really matter what's written in the books. I'm just asking you, what do you think would be more moral?
Gotcha.
Because in the one sense, I think the farmer's doing something perfectly ethical, which is protecting his property. If that results in death, then that's the fault of the people violating the rights, not his. Versus you are taking the rights away from a human being in a systematic fashion.
What if the people that he was protecting the farm from had no clue they were doing anything wrong?
Yeah, I wouldn't care. Same thing.
Interesting.
We can apply this principle. If you think it changes the action, if they know what they're doing is wrong. If somebody was committing rape and they didn't know it was wrong, do you think the woman would have a right to use lethal force to stop herself from getting raped?
I would consider rape a bad action where the action of the rats trying to eat the crops and them not realizing humans claim that land as property, I would not consider that a wrong action. If I went to crops to take the food from the crops and there was like an alien species that it was their crops because they also live here and they went to kill me, I don't know exactly what that would mean, but I do know that it would mean that I didn't do anything wrong. But maybe they were...
You personally don't have to be doing anything wrong from your perspective to violate somebody else's rights. So, like, again, if I was under mind control and I had no control over my own body and the person controlling my mind forced me to rape a woman, I'm not really I'm not necessarily doing anything wrong, but I am violating, but the other person's rights are being violated. But I can't be held responsible. I think that's what you're trying to...
Well, what I'm trying to point out, and let's have the steak be a rat steak to make it easier. If you have 5 rats coming after food you're growing, and you kill those rats to feed somebody that food, when there's another rat that's just hanging out, not trying to take any food, and you could kill that rat to feed somebody that rat, if the equal food is going to come from the food that you killed the 5 rats to get or killing that 1 rat, and all the rats involved did nothing intentionally wrong, they were just wrong place, wrong time, being on the side that would be in favor of killing extra rats when there's no rat that did anything to deserve it does not make any sense to me.
Yeah, there may be a threshold where I'd say, okay, if you could choose to kill 1 rat in some sort of systematic fashion where we're taking away the rights of rats in order to eat versus for each loaf of bread, you have to kill like 1 million rats. The proportions may be so far off that I'd favor systematically killing a rat for like food, just because, again, just the sheer amount of deaths are so outweighed. But in a real life circumstance, I have not seen any evidence that like there's such a huge disproportion of animals dying in, say, a field versus an animal that is raised for meat that it would justify systematically taking away the rights of animals.
I'm not saying there is
protect
either.
A greater amount of rights.
I'm not saying there is either, but I think it's good for us to know where we would stand on that. So I think it's worth looking over. But the fact that it's at random is what blows my mind. So let's say it's 100. So it's a lot, but it's not the threshold you're talking about. You think it would make sense that, like, you personally, if you had a field, you would kill 100 rats that were just being natural and doing their thing and trying to eat from the field. You'd kill 100 rats to produce the amount of food that maybe one rat, if you just killed and ate the rat, that one rat could produce. The idea of it being morally acceptable to kill 100 of the same sized, same getting joy out of life, same amount of suffering rats, when nobody knew they were doing a violation issue. A human breaking into a house to steal stuff, you could say, this is my property, they came in to steal my stuff, I had to protect my stuff, whatever. But in this other case, they're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah, I don't know if you're talking about a 100-to-1 ratio. I don't know exactly where the numbers would lie, but once you're starting to get around like single-digit differences, like 2, 3 versus 1, I don't feel comfortable again with the idea of systematically taking away the rights of a class of animal or human. Just for the sake of the idea of reducing overall death or suffering. The rights seem to matter more to me. Like again, I can make a similar example where, let's say 10 men were raping one woman. You could either kill all 10 men to prevent that rape, or you could allow that woman to be raped and everybody lives. Like, I'd rather just murder all of them.
Yeah, no, I would
save
too.
That. So, like,
well, I not even just rather. I'd rather take out all 10 than 9 of them.
Well, that's what I said. I'd rather kill all of them than
anything else.
Than have a situation where everybody lives. Like, even if they were under mind control, I think I knew that they weren't doing. They didn't know what they were doing. I think I might even still. So I would
do the same if it was 10 men raping a sheep. I'm not a utilitarian, so I don't think entirely on this idea that, okay, well, let's just look at what causes the least amount of suffering. I think more from a rights-based approach. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm a utilitarian when it comes to animals in our current society where the legal system is not on their side. I'm not a utilitarian in principle or on when it comes to humans especially. But probably just not even in principle at all if the law were on one side. I wouldn't kill a cow to save 100 cows, but if it had to happen within a system where the law is not on their side, I would take that number difference.
Okay, but you wouldn't do that for a human in a human context, would you?
No, same thing. I would not sacrifice a human for another human. Trolley car problem, I don't switch it over.
No, I mean, like, say if humans didn't have rights, so like Jews, Nazi Germany.
I see. Yeah, we're in society. I mean, I clearly would do what I thought I could get away with. If I knew I could get away with it and somebody was killing somebody and I could kill the killer, I would do it. The main reason would be for my own protection. If I knew somebody was willing to kill a human, I would want to take them out so they weren't likely to kill me. And yeah, I think I would just do it anyways, as far as I think that they did this horrible thing. But I don't think we're born with like any natural rights. Rights are just something that
they have to be granted.
Yeah, exactly. They have to be granted. And that's why we start a society to get protection from the government.
I'm just wondering why you use a utilitarian approach if the idea behind your animal rights activism would be to grant them rights, right?
Well, because there is there's legally an amount of suffering that is allowed to happen, which is whatever the extent is right now. And the utilitarian approach would be cutting that down. And that seems like it's got to be the most important. It's got to be the most important thing. I would look at humans the same way. In a real world situation.
So just to be clear, the reason you would just do anything you could to reduce their suffering and have this utilitarian approach where, say, you'd kill one cow to save 100 cows in a factory farm is just because they don't have any rights anyway. So, there's no way for you to commit some kind of action to grant them rights. Something like that.
Something like that, I think.
So they don't have any rights anyway. So the only strategy you would have in a situation where they don't have rights is to just be a welfarist, and just however way you can reduce their suffering, you'd be in favor of it.
Yeah. Yes. Aside from it's not what you would preach on the street, would you not, like in your own mind?
Yeah, I wouldn't feel comfortable killing a cow to save 100 cows, whether they have rights or not. Same with a human being.
Like, what if you were at a factory and there's like thousands of cows at this factory, and the guy that owned the factory just wanted to mess with you, but he was being honest, and he said, "We're about to kill these 100 over here, but this one that we weren't going to kill, that can just go and live in a sanctuary. If you decide to have us kill that one instead, we'll kill this one, and these other 100 will go off to a sanctuary. But if you don't want us to kill this one that was not going to die, you can just take it home with you, take it to your sanctuary. But then these other 100 would die. Would you not do the utilitarian calculation in that specific instance?"
Right. I don't know if I feel comfortable negotiating with with a genocidal, Holocaust perpetrator like that. Again, in a human context, if it were a Jewish Holocaust and somebody gave you that same ultimatum, would you negotiate?
I wouldn't do it with humans. I feel that it's different.
Yeah. So
maybe if
I
it
would
was
like
legal,
you to just. I would just like you to name the trait then. Name the trait that's lacking in animals that if lacking in human beings, you would make that sort of negotiation with a Holocaust perpetrator.
So two things. I think what pushes me over the edge on this is in the animal case, not knowing for sure exactly what their will to live, want for the future is, and me knowing with humans. And I think I just base it on myself. If I had less of a will to live myself, then maybe I wouldn't view it differently. But I wouldn't want to be chosen in that way. I wouldn't want somebody to let me die to save the 100, and so I wouldn't want to put that on another human, since I know how my species works to some extent. But doesn't it feel right? I know you don't want to deal with a Holocaust person, whatever, but doesn't it feel like the right thing to do would be to save the 100 cows, even though we care about cows?
Yeah, if they're all gonna die anyway,
let's say they're not.
What do you mean?
So these ones are not all going to die anyways. This guy is really wealthy, but he just loves having this factory farm, and he has decided that either 100 of them are going to go home with you because you have a huge sanctuary, or one is going to go home with you and you have that sanctuary. And whichever one you don't take, those ones end up going to slaughter and getting eaten and all that stuff.
I'm not entirely understanding the hypothetical.
So this factory farm has
two options.
You got to this factory farm. The guy's all like, "These 100 I was just about to slaughter and send off to be eaten, and I'm going to give you a chance to take these 100 with you to your sanctuary. But if you take them, I'm going to kill this one that I was going to let go free to a sanctuary." So you got to swap out an individual cow that, to whatever degree, wants to live and not be harmed, to save 100 based on what we know about cows?
Sure. I don't think I'd be comfortable with negotiating with a Holocaust perpetrator, just like in a human context. I don't think I'd make that deal with a Nazi.
Well, let's say not negotiating means the 100 die. And it's fine to stick with that because I do when it comes to the trolley car. It's going towards the 5 and I can switch it over to the 1. I let it kill the 5. But are you saying you would let it kill the 100 cows?
Yeah, I don't think I would negotiate with somebody like that. Same with a Nazi. If a Nazi was giving me a similar ultimatum like that, like I would just choose the third option and kill him.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. I don't want cows to die.
Yeah, so I think we can kind of wrap things up. Honestly, I think the only reason you have these positions that Joey is, being extreme when it comes to his activism is just because you trivialize animal lives. I just can't see you saying the same thing if Joey was sitting across the table from somebody like Himmler or, a serial killer who's killing and eating people, and they just plain and flatly stated to Joey, I'm not going to go vegan, plain and simple. I'm just never going to do it. And then Joey gets angry and starts, berating the person, saying they're terrible, they're committing this. I don't think you'd have the same thing to say to Joey, saying he's an extremist.
If I am right, if him doing that brings more harm to Jews in this case, or people or animals,
well,
then it must be the right thing to do. It would mean his emotions got in the way of what was right. Now, not what was right as the actual right, but what was right to say as a person that cares.
Like, again, they're telling you plainly that they don't have an interest in going vegan. So if, like, the most objective thing we can go on is their word, then I don't see how that would make a difference, for one thing. And secondly, I don't know how it creates a stronger moral impetus to say, okay, well, could you maybe reduce the amount of animals or people you're killing? Like, again, you're trivializing their lives versus trying your best to get the point across that all of these lives matter and you should do everything you can to avoid killing them.
But you're talking to people that also trivialize their lives, so you gotta meet them.
Well,
at
I don't
their
think
level.
they trivialize their lives.
They trivialize the animals' lives.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and so you kind of have to come to it at their level. But yes, you had asked this question before, and I didn't get around to answering it because then another question came up. But the reason I think it's best to do it, and again, this is all speculation, I'm just honestly trying to do what's best for the animals. But the reason you want to do it is because somebody that's willing to reduce and goes like, you know what, I think I need this meat for health, but I don't think I need so much. I don't need the unhealthy stuff, so I'm not going to eat chicken nuggets and hot dogs, but I'm willing to reduce. That person, if they truly are going to do that, then their mind, the wheels are turning. Maybe the next week they're going to go, oh man, it's cool I'm doing this thing because now that I'm doing it and I think of these animals, like I'm actually saving animals. I heard from this reasonable vegan guy that because of me cutting it in half, only 100 animals die instead of 200. And he might feel off about that. And then after a couple more weeks, especially if I keep in touch with this person, then they might be like, you know what, I'm going to cut dairy out because I didn't know about the taking the calves away and the forcefully impregnating. And it leads to change.
If you're talking to somebody who's thinking like that to begin with, where, oh, well, I feel like, I like the idea of killing less animals when I don't even need to eat that much anyway, why don't you just push them that little bit further in the conversation and say, if you feel good about lowering your animal deaths, why don't you just bring it to zero? Wouldn't you feel fantastic?
Yeah, no, I think it is best to either get to that level but not push it too hard or start with that level. Like Earthling Ed, I think he's one of the best at it, but he goes too far because I think he starts off great talking about what we should do, the ultimate vegan message. But when people are receptive to him and really enjoy what he's saying and they think about it and they want to reduce and cut down, I think it's a good point. As soon as they are pointing out, I'm not ever going to stop eating meat. I was raised on it. I love it, but I'm thinking about whatever. Like at that point, I think the right thing to do for animals would be to encourage that and to get that person walking away thinking vegans are pretty cool. And having that extra push of just hammering, I just don't think is ultimately good for animals in the long run. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, generally, this is a problem for all forms of activism, trans rights activism, gay activism, black rights, you name it. What tends to happen is the group that is the group that are the ones perpetrating violence of some sort against that group are the ones telling you, why do you have to do activism in that way? Like, if you just weren't so out loud and proud about it. They always try to control the message because they don't like any opposition. And when you do things like that, like people do this with vegans too, when you have somebody plainly stating that they have no intention of going vegan, they're just never going to do it. And then they play this game with you after you say, so you're like in favor of a Holocaust, like, oh, well, you know what? Like if you weren't so extreme, they already told you they had no interest.
Well, here's the
bullshit.
difference.
It's a tactic to control what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, so here's the difference. Let's imagine about half the carnists we're going to be talking to are like J.D. Garland from Garland Farms, where they're just anti-vegans, and then the other half are people that might eventually get there. The fact that there's so many J.D. Garlands out there that they're just trying to destroy veganism doesn't mean that we shouldn't imagine that assume most people are like the other ones I'm talking about. Because yes, anybody that's just, I hate veganism's the worst, we're not going to win those people over no matter what. So what we say to them doesn't mean anything. But we never want to accidentally push away somebody that was possibly going to be a soon to be vegan. And that's my concern. But I mean, I've gone back and forth over the past 10, 15 years.
I would just add, the Nigerian scammers actually use this as a technique. And what they'll do is they'll actually, when they do make scams, especially internet scams like through email lists, they will make it obvious that it's a scam. So what that does is it weeds out people who wouldn't fall for the scam anyway. They'll just waste your time and be like, oh, yeah, sure, just send me the account. Oh, I can't find it, and they just want to fuck with you. So it weeds out all the smarter people, and then you're just left with idiots who will actually fall for it. So I think with vegan activism, it can be a similar circumstance where, look, if people are ethically minded, like they care about animal rights, they care about suffering, death, things like that, they're not going to be the type of people who are dissuaded by a vegan saying, okay, well, you're supporting a Holocaust. Like, don't you feel bad, like, that you're, like, literally perpetrating horrible atrocities? Like, why are you saying you'd never go vegan? Like if they're a bit aggressive like that and really trying to bring across this moral impetus that you are doing something terrible, the type of person that would go vegan who's interested in ethics isn't going to be somebody who's dissuaded by an interaction that's a little bit aggressive with a vegan. So I'm not convinced that you're going to have a situation where, oh, but you could be turning somebody off. It's just not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, it's different than a religious movement where it's entirely based on woo-woo bullshit. You have to kind of sucker people in with, oh, like, we're all nice. It's this nice community. We all get to hang out and eat fucking pita bread later. That sort of thing requires very positive interactions because there's no logical basis behind it. Why are you worshiping this god going to this church over another? There's not really any reason. With veganism, like, again, it's a logical extension of human rights. It's something that you can kind of logically come to the conclusion of if you even just value your own rights, right?
Yeah.
So it's not something that's going to be so easily, you're not going to be able to put somebody off so easily for life if they have a bad interaction with a vegan.
Well, it's just such a big change of somebody's life. So I'm with you. I mean, I convinced myself to go vegan before I even knew what it was. I just started pondering it one day, and then I found out it was a thing. So everybody's brain works slightly different. The problem is what stands between what we have now and veganism is people thinking about things and changing. I don't know what number that is. It might be a thing where it's going to be like 25% or something, and then the rest just does a snowball effect. But there are a set amount of people in the world today that eat animal products that with the right conversations with them, they are going to be the ones that change. But they grew up eating meat, dairy, and eggs, and it's so much of part of their lives that they would rather think, oh, this must be an acceptable thing because everybody does it. It would be way too hard for me to cut it out. So I'd rather just assume the whole movement is pointless. Where if we got those people to start thinking about it in details, being anti-fur but still eating meat, and being anti-SeaWorld, and then slowly but surely these changes, I think, will change it. But I don't think I'm necessarily, I don't think mine must be right. I just think that it's probably the best route to go. But yeah.
Yeah, I think what's really going to make the world vegan is just technological changes ultimately, like lab-grown meat and stuff.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think when you're talking about situations like that where you have somebody who's against SeaWorld but still eats meat, you're kind of average person. I think the best thing for them is to just have, good discussions with vegans who have a decent grasp on philosophy and have good arguments for veganism, and really make arguments for veganism and not like this idea for welfarism. Because again, it's my belief that if you argue for welfarism and you pat somebody on the back for killing like 50% less animals, you're just trivializing their lives, and that's the exact opposite of what you want.
Well, one thing that the only way we could even kind of know, I mean, we can't know, but would be to look at vegans when they turn vegan. We now know that we wouldn't ever want to harm an animal, but what about that transition period of when we were deciding to go vegan and I don't know about you, but went vegetarian, we're like kind of flexitarian for a month and like eased our way into it. I think that's a good idea of showing you what others might be like when they hear about the vegan message.
Yeah, like I will say this, different methods of activism are going to work better for different people. What turned me vegan was a Gary Yourofsky speech.
Cool.
And he certainly doesn't promote welfarism at all in any of his activism. And I'm not somebody who cares so much about being treated well in a conversation. If somebody I only ever really focus on the strength of the argument. So Gary being aggressive or whatever, calling animal eaters like pieces of shit, it doesn't, like, that wouldn't make me turn something off and not listen and go the other way. So I will say, like, and I'm feeling like we're kind of at the end of the discussion, what you're doing isn't necessarily wrong in all cases, because, yeah, there are some people who kind of need to be gently wiggled into things, and there are people who kind of need to be hit with hard facts and be told to fuck you, and it kind of sticks in their head and they keep thinking about it. And there are people who are just kind of vibe with more aggressive voices, and people who vibe with more friendly, voices, right? So,
For sure. Cool, man. Well, that was a great talk. I'm glad we had it.
Sure.
I don't know how often you're up for having discussions, debates, but I have another channel where I talk about abortion and that kind of stuff. I'd love to chat with you about that someday.
Yeah, sure. You might want to watch my debate with Dr. Ravi on abortion and see if you actually have an interest, because I changed my view on abortion after that debate.
I watched the latest one you had with Destiny on it, and I thought that was great. And I thought of things that I agreed with you and disagreed, but I'll check out the Avi one, and then I'll shoot you an email.
Okay,
awesome.
Sure.
All right, take care, man. Yep, see ya. All right, well, that was cool. Yeah, it works out that it just ended there because I thought I had my laptop plugged in, and I guess I didn't, and I just got a low battery thing. Cool. I didn't get a chance to tell him that I like been following his channel for a while, and I used to watch all this stuff many years ago about all his like debunking fitness people, the worst of the industry stuff, and I really liked all that stuff. So I think he might only know of me as as somebody that wanted to debate him, and so So yeah, anyways, that was fun. That was kind of wild. Definitely went different than I imagined. Um, yeah, cool. Did anybody, I didn't get a chance to look at any of the comments. Obviously, I was focused on the conversation. I saw a couple comments here and there. Michael, I don't know if you're still there, but that was funny that you mentioned I should bring up the Apple thing. That was one of my notes that I put here. Oh yeah, there you are. Good chat. Well done. Cool, cool. Yeah, I thought it went good. It was fun branching off into kind of the more extreme stuff. I don't know if he was crystal clear on his stance, which is fine. It's tough to be in that situation where you're comparing the one cow to the 100 cows, but the answer being that you just wouldn't make deals with Nazis. Therefore, his choice he's making is for the 100 to die. It is like the trolley car problem, which I didn't ask him what exactly he would do with the humans in that case, but he didn't base it on the same reason. He wasn't saying I would let the 100 die because that was naturally going to happen, where I wouldn't want to choose the one to die. And I hope he thinks about that further, and I hope that I have a conversation with him about it when he's thought about it further, because I don't think that was a solid answer for somebody knowing what they would do. Now, I've heard him talk, and I do think he thinks of humans and animals about identical, and I don't know if most vegans do. I don't know if you guys out there think of them as that. Most vegans will say in a burning building, they'll save the human over the dog. So how extreme he was against the idea that I would view an animal holocaust slightly different than a human holocaust means that he wouldn't save the human over the dog, but I didn't ask him that question either. But I think more vegans would be on my side, at least with that detail of it, but maybe not. What do you guys think? Turning Veganese said, Gaines didn't go berserk. Kind of sad. I wanted a show. Yeah, no, I mean, he got his vegan Gaines voice happening where he gets a little extreme. But I don't know. I think a lot of people try to put on a show, and so they'll say something horrible to him, and then he'll get mad and lose it. Where in my mind, I just like to have calm conversations. In the same way that I would talk to non-vegans about baby steps they could do to causing less harm to animals, I want to have that same conversation with vegan extremists, which I would consider vegan Gaines a vegan extremist. I wanted to be relaxed, so maybe me being relaxed made that kind of go that way. I would have liked to hear his answer. Yeah, on the cow one. It would have been nice to get let's see, concession on. Oh, it went away. That you both have a threshold respect. Yeah, maybe next time. Hopefully I'll set up another talk with him and have some more detailed things to bring up. My understanding is that vegan Gaines is a threshold deontologist. What could obligation even mean if it didn't mean something that would be much worse to not do, merely virtuous action? I'm not sure if I follow that, but I might just be tired right now. The difference between your position is just where you draw the line, it seems. Yes and no. Because of my thoughts on viewing the death slightly different. Again, I don't think because of the lack of a will for the future that animals should die. I do not think they should have that right taken away, but I do not view their life as important as a human because I do know about that will for the future. So with him, he doesn't know if he would save the 100 and kill the one cow, where in my mind, especially in a world with the laws how they are, I would save the larger number of animals at any given point. Now it does become complicated because I think in a sense domesticated animals probably need to die because they can't live out in nature. But from the moral element, I would save 100 from being bred into existence before I would save the one. So maybe that's the route I should take it. So I think the threshold elements different because I don't really, my threshold's somewhere, and Michael, you know that. But for the most part, I wouldn't sacrifice one person for a billion people, and I wouldn't sacrifice a billion cows for one cow. I switch it around when it comes to animals. Where suffering, it's harder to switch around because if all else is equal, the suffering is comparable, where we cannot compare the intelligence of animals. Surviving 1 hour plus with vegan gains without getting aggro as F is good score, advanced player. He chose to kill a human over an animal. That's pathetic. I think that's complicated, not good. Now, choosing to kill a human that is up for killing animals, if they were to know that you don't need to kill animals, it becomes complicated. But yeah, in general, I'm more on the side of humans living than animals, but I'm more on the side of animals living than a bad human. So yeah. I mean, with respect to activism on where you draw the line and things. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, correct. Carson, some here in the chat amongst ourselves, not necessarily pertaining to something you've stated. I don't know. Obligation here simply means that it's required for consistency in my value system. Okay, gotcha. So I'm confused. Does Alex live or die? Yeah, what do you guys think? Really quickly, I do have to go, but anybody on here, vegans, any vegans on here, do you think Alex O'Connor should die right now? Like I don't mean do you think legally he should have to die, but if you could press a button and have him die, and I'm assuming that there are probably carnists out there that if you could read their minds, that only for carnist reasons, I hate using that word, but I'm doing it anyways, but only for carnist reasons, you might press a button and have them die. Would you have Alex die? So somebody please. Michael, thank you. I'm glad you said live. Let's see. If I know the animal personally, but not the human, or I know the human, but I hate him or her, then I will kill the human. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say to people that have pets that view them as family, that they would let a stranger human die over their pet. I personally think that's wrong. But really, the idea of letting people die or not is kind of complicated. And the only thing I can say for certain is that I don't want to die. So if you had to choose between your pet and me, let me live. Just press it. 1 for live, 2 for die. 1. Okay, cool. Good. And yeah, very reasonable. I wouldn't kill anyone, human or animal. But what if it was in defense? So vegan for kindness, would you kill a human that was about to would you kill a lion that was about to kill a human? So you're defending another human. Would you kill a human that was going to kill and eat a bunch of animals? Is there any level that you would? Okay. VL now 1. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I agree. I don't think Alex should die. There are probably a handful of, animal abuse situations where I would press a button to have a human die because of this. But it really becomes complicated. I know people that I love and care about that get their babies circumcised because it's legal and acceptable. And I wouldn't press a button to end their lives just because they do this horrible thing. And I think circumcising humans is worse than a lot of things that happen to animals. And I wouldn't press a button to kill them. It's really hard to judge people that are doing things that are legal. It's really complicated. Let's see. Yes, assuming there's no external consequences. Interesting. Okay. When we have our talk on Sunday, I think Sunday. No, maybe me and you are talking Saturday. Anyways, this weekend when we talk, we have to talk about that. You would let Alex O'Connor die? That's wild. As I'll tell you tomorrow. Yeah, Jeremy, me and you are tomorrow. I was talking to Jerome. I'll tell you tomorrow. Magically making Alex disappear might very well be good, but this is different from someone criminal real world. Yeah, let's talk about that. I'm curious to see if it connects to the idea of having more pleasure versus suffering, because I have not been won over on that. I do not think added pleasure is necessary. It depends on the human for me. Alex just needs to take a good. Okay. I like to let a lion kill. I would I would let a lion kill most humans. Interesting. I'd be curious to see if it was just most random humans, or they have to have done something bad. If it was just a regular human just out shooting a documentary or something. But then again, they went into their territory and took that risk. So I don't know. I guess it would depend. If it was someone I loved, I would probably defend them. Yeah, you got to defend people you love. I mean, what a weird take, since I'm, into the philosophical side of things and looking at the morals and whatnot. But really, so much of anything that animals, including humans, do is just what we are driven to do. I have this passion to care about and save my loved ones to a level where I have to be honest about that, and I can't just claim that's not the reasonable thing to do. So blah, blah, blah. I have to go with it. I'm agreeing 100% with Jerome. Interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm talking to one of you tomorrow, one the next day. So we're going to break that down. So y'all would spare Alex if it were, let's see, we're being live streamed and in secret murder. Yeah, maybe some. No, I think everybody on here is being honest. Yeah, no, it's very interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Cause part of me wouldn't kill somebody because they're doing legal acts. And like I just said, that's a whole different thing, but there are probably legal acts that somebody could do that I would think, would be horrible. I mean, for example, if somebody thinks they need to eat meat and they kill an animal and eat it, that's different to me than somebody that knows they don't need to eat meat and they kill an animal to eat it. Like those two things would change how I press the button or not. I'll be seeing you tomorrow. Yes, Vegan for Kindness. People check out that stream tomorrow. And then also I'll be talking to Jeremy tomorrow. Okay, awesome. Good talk, guys. I will see you guys tomorrow. Take care.